Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I am Megan Lathrop, and I'm the co-creator of our money coaching program here at Capital One. And we are streaming live here from the Back Bay Cafe in Boston and across the nation in all of our cafes. And we're so excited that you're joining us here in person and live streaming. And I'm sitting here with James Clear, author, speaker, and habit experts, who will be diving into a dialogue with around how small mind shifts can make really large goals happen by making them really digestible, actionable ideas that we can actually take place in our life. So we're really lucky to have him, and I'm excited to jump in because we have a lot to cover. James has been working with some of our money coaches over the last handful of months and has been collaborating around how can we bring these habits and micro habits into our financial life. And he's worked with a lot of our money coaches to determine what things are people bringing to the table in their conversations and in their coaching sessions, and how can we bring even more of your expertise into what our coaches are offering. So I've heard a lot of great things from our coaches, and I've heard it's been a great experience.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so first of all, hi everybody. It's great to be here. And the money coaches have been incredibly easy for me to work with because they're so talented themselves. We've had a lot of really good conversations about the struggles that people have building better habits, specifically related to finance and personal finance and savings and so on. But also in general, a lot of the roadblocks that people deal with money in their life are very similar to the roadblocks that they deal with elsewhere in their life. And I think that our conversation tonight will probably kind of unearth and reveal a little bit about the core structure behind all habits and why we sort of get locked into some patterns and not others, and what we can do from a practical standpoint to change some of those and make our actions more productive.
Absolutely. Great. Well, let's jump in. You have a unique approach to this question. How can we live better? So do you mind sharing a little bit about that and include some of your background?
Sure. So I've been writing about habits and behavior change for the last 5 years now. I just finished a book on the topic. It'll be coming out later this fall from Penguin Random House. And my approach to that question, how can we live better, I think it mostly falls into one of two categories. So you have decisions that you make, and those decisions set you on a certain trajectory, and then you have habits which take you along that trajectory a certain way. And so your decisions are about sort of getting you on the right entrance ramp on the highway, and your habits are about how long you travel along that path. And tonight, our conversation is mostly about how to build better habits and how to kind of follow the path that you want to. But a lot of my other work also focuses on making good decisions and making sure that we're orienting ourselves in the right way. And I think that if you can really focus on those two key things, your choices and your habits, then you'll find that you do have a much better chance of living the life that you're hoping to live or wanting to live. And so that's where a lot of my work starts from. As far as what that actually looks like what we'll talk about tonight, what my articles and books focus on, I am agnostic on where a good idea comes from. So I draw on ideas from biology and neuroscience and psychology and philosophy and all kinds of areas. I don't really care where the idea comes from. What I care about is it true, is it accurate, and is it useful? And my job, I think, is to take some of those ideas, some of the best things that scientists have figured out or that different experts have been working on for a long time, and then organize them in a way that's easy to understand and simple to apply to daily life. And so that is kind of my role, is not, I hope that I can come up with some good ideas of my own as well, but the number of people who have lived and died is 14-1 compared to the number of people who are alive today. Wow. So pretty much any idea you can come up with, someone has probably thought about it over the span of human history. And my job is to find those best ideas and deliver them in a useful format.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely. We talked about this a lot backstage, about you being a bridge between all these worlds. There's lots of people researching and coming up with these great ideas, and you're really passionate about bringing it down and making it practical and making it usable for people in their daily lives.
I think knowledge is only powerful if it's useful. You can know a fact, but if you just know a fact but can't apply it to daily life, it doesn't have that much power for you, even if it might be true. And so, my job is to try to make those facts come alive in a practical sense.
Amazing. Well, how have you applied so far some of what we're talking about to your collaboration with our coaches, or even if that segues into just around our relationship to money?
Sure. So the work with the money coaches has been interesting because we've There are plenty of tactics that you can have for building better habits. Like you can talk about breaking things down or redesigning your environment to make habits more effective, or the social environment and how that impacts our habits. And we can get into a variety of those things in this conversation. But the interesting part about working with coaches is that it was less about the tactics than it was about figuring out the values and the principles that are behind a lot of our decisions. So much of the choices that we make in life are driven by our beliefs. And some of those beliefs are true, but many of them are just conditioned. And if you want, you can condition a new set of beliefs to guide your behavior. And this is something that I think a lot of the conversation about habits doesn't really focus on, and something that I think can be really powerful, which is that the way that your habits form, and we can talk about this more if you want to dive into a particular area, but I like to think about your identity and how that influences habits. And I think about it as the layers in an onion. So the outermost layer of behavior change is your outcomes. And this is all the things that people talk about. Things like, I want to lose 40 pounds in the next 6 months, or I want to make 6 figures this year, or I want to meditate 10 minutes a day. It's all the outcome that you want. The next layer in are your processes. And so this is usually where the conversation stops. People say, I have this goal, this outcome, and then I have a process or a plan for achieving that. So, in order to lose 40 pounds, I need to go to the gym 5 days a week, and I need to change my diet and so on. So you have the outcome and the process. But I think there's a deeper layer of behavior change, and we'll call that your identity. And those beliefs that you have about yourself often dictate your ability to follow through on the process and ultimately get that outcome. And so often people think that they have an opportunity to change their habits or their results because they have a good plan for change, but all they did was change their plan. They didn't change the underlying beliefs about themselves. Right. So for example, take 2 people who are trying to quit smoking. You could ask the first person, how's it going or whatever, and would you like a cigarette? And they say, no thanks, I'm trying to stop. The implicit assumption behind that statement is that I am still a smoker who's trying to stop, who's trying to be someone else. Then you could ask another person, say, would you like a smoke? And they could say, no thanks, I'm not a smoker. Right. And so that signals like an identity shift, right? They don't even identify as that type of person anymore. It becomes much easier to follow through on that process. And I think that that's one of the lessons, is that true behavior change is identity change. Absolutely. Because once you believe that you're that type of person, you're not even really pursuing behavior change anymore. You're just acting like the type of person you already believe yourself to be. And
how do we do that? How do we step into really recognizing this is who I am?
It's a great question. So the first answer to that is, how do you believe the things you believe right now about yourself? How do you believe the current identity that you have? And the reason is because you have evidence for it. So if you go to church every Sunday for 20 years, you believe that you are religious. If you study biology every Wednesday night for 20 minutes, you believe that you are studious. So your actions, each action you take is like a vote for the type of person that you believe that you are. And so as you keep casting votes, eventually the evidence accumulates and you believe this is who I am. And so the answer to changing your identity, to achieving this kind of true level of behavior change, is to start casting votes for the new person that you want to become. So each time you go to the gym, it's this little signal of, well, maybe I'm the type of person who is fit. And if you cast enough votes and accumulate enough evidence, then you actually become that person rather than just trying to be. And this, I think, this gets to the true reason why habits are so important. We talk about habits for what they can get us. We talk about, how we can earn more money, or we can be more productive, or so on. And those outcomes are important, but the true power is that they can change what we believe about ourselves. If you can build a habit of going to the gym and accumulate enough evidence, then suddenly you believe that you are a fit person. And that I think is a more powerful level of change. Absolutely. Because so much of the anguish and the pain that we go through each day is our self-judgment, right? We think, we have all this negative self-talk. And so if you can accumulate enough evidence through your habits, then you can start to shift that negative self-talk and be happy with who you are.
Well, and it sounds like we're in a dialogue with our actions. And then our actions are telling us who we are, and so then who we are is informing our actions.
It's a two-way street, which is really fascinating, because you see this all the time. People, as the evidence accumulates, and once you start to believe that identity about yourself, then you use that as justification for your next action.
Right.
So you say things like, I'm bad with technology. Well, once you've internalized that identity, then you're like, well, why do I even try to figure out this new piece of software or whatever, because that's not my identity. Right. So then it changes your behavior. And then that behavior gives you another little bit of evidence for that identity, and it becomes this cycle. And people do this all the time, right? They say, I'm bad with directions, I'm not good at math, I'm not, like all kinds of things.
Right.
And we do it in other places too, like you could say anything that that you assigned your identity, like I'm a Yankees fan or I'm a Red Sox fan or something like that, suddenly becomes a justification to act a certain way, and then that next behavior reinforces it and so on.
Definitely.
So yeah, it's a two-way street.
Right. Well, that's a nice segue into, we've been talking a lot within Capital One and with our coaches around our New Year's resolutions. And so many people come in and they have resolutions around making this their best year financially, or saving money, or not spending money here. And we have a ton of financial New Year's resolutions, and they tend to not last. They tend to last for most of us for a few weeks, and we forget about that resolution. So what would you say about how can someone hold up a resolution?
So pretty much, I think it's useful to look at your life as like a system. And any system has a set of rules that guide its behavior. So for example, a piece of software has like the code or the algorithm that guides the behavior of the software. The system of the universe has the laws of physics that guide how it acts. The standard operating procedures of a company that kind of guide the behaviors of the employees. And your life is a system as well, and you've got a set of rules or a set of forces in that system that drive or dictate the way that you act each day. So, for example, one part of that system is your physical environment. So the things that are on your kitchen counter at home or your desk at work. And as a small example, so my personal life, my wife and I used to buy apples, and we would put them in the crisper at the bottom of the fridge and like tuck them away there. And I would forget that they were there because they were just weren't visible. And then 2 weeks would go by and they'd all go bad, and then we'd be throwing them out, and I'd be annoyed every time because we're throwing money away.
Yeah.
And so the one change that we made to that system, or that part of the system, was to buy a display bowl and put it in the middle of the counter. And then when we bought apples, we put them there, and now it's visible, and I eat them all the time. They're gone in like 3 days. And that's just because the system changed a little bit.
Right.
And so there are many, many ways to do this, and we can talk about a lot of them. But environment design is one aspect of the system that shapes your life. And so many people will set a resolution in the old system. So they have a new goal, but they haven't changed the things that have been driving their old behavior. So you need to redesign the system if you want the new goal to be something that emerges naturally. Right. And this is kind of an interesting way to think about your life, is that all of your habits and behaviors that you have right now, your current life is perfectly designed for your current results. Because that's why you get them, right?
That makes sense.
And so in order to get new results, you need to design the life to be structured in a different way.
You're making it seem so simple. I'm feeling inspired with your apple example, that by moving the apples out of the fridge and having them on the counter, we'll eat them. So that seems, we talked earlier about there's these significant moments where if you just make a change in your life in one moment, so much can shift. And it's kind of reminding me of that too, that makes it.
Yeah, so I'll talk about that in just a second. I think it's important to say, this isn't just about putting apples on your counter or wearing the same colored outfit each day so you don't have to make a decision about that or whatever. It's not just about small changes, it's actually about accumulating 100 of those things that are all working in your favor. Imagine how much easier it would be to follow through on those goals if you were living in an environment where you had 50 things that were nudging you in the right direction.
Right. Oh, it would be a great life.
So your question about decisive moments, that's the phrase that I use for that. I think that it's empowering because once you realize this, which I'll explain here, there's not that much to do when it comes to building better habits. It seems like there's a lot to change your life, but there doesn't have to be that much. And what I mean by that is, so there's a moment each night around 5:15 when either I change into my workout clothes and go to the gym, or I sit on the couch and watch The Office and order Indian food. And it's really just that moment, those 2 minutes of changing into my clothes, that determines what's going to happen for the next 2 hours, right? If I change into my workout clothes, then I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work out for another hour and do, everything's going to happen, right? But it's really just about those 2 minutes. And there's another one in the morning where, I'll sit down at my computer and I have either I will check ESPN and start reading the news of the day, or I'll open up my document of articles and start writing. And the next hour, how it goes, is largely determined by those 2 minutes. And so I like to call those little decisive moments, those entrance ramps that I talked about earlier that kind of lead you in a certain direction. And no matter what your goals are, you probably have, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 of those decisive moments throughout each day that determine, like, do I go out to eat for lunch, or do I pack my lunch, or do I decide to sit down and meditate for 10 minutes, or check social media again, or whatever. Right. And you can kind of go through your day and think about, like, what does a good day look like for me when I do the things that I say I want to do, and where are those moments at? Mm-hmm. And if you can just organize your life to mastering those little 2-minute segments, then the rest of your day goes pretty smoothly. You don't really have to worry about all 24 hours. It's really just about those, like, 10 minutes or so.
That's really inspiring, because to me, when we look at all these things we want to change in our life and we want to develop all these great habits, it can feel totally overwhelming. That's the feedback I get from a lot of people, is just, where do we start? But when we realize that maybe the habit isn't, like in your example that you gave, it isn't going to the gym every day necessarily. When you're starting, the habit can just be choosing to change into your gym clothes at that time, and then trusting that the behavior that you want to have to happen will follow. So the
imbalance there is that people are so worried about their results that they don't master the thing that matters most of all, which is the art of showing up. Like, if you just, I have a reader who, he ended up losing over 100 pounds. And the way that he did it was he went to the gym for 5 minutes. He did this for the first, like, 6 weeks. And he had to leave after 5 minutes.
Oh, really?
He didn't allow himself to stay any longer. And it's a refreshing strategy, because you realize that especially in the beginning, it's not about the results.
Yes.
You can only become the type of person who loses 100 pounds if you're going to the gym all the time.
Right.
And so he just focused on going to the gym. And once he did that, then he was like, well, I'm here all the time. Might as well start working out more.
Right.
And, you know, so once you can shift your life and change that, then once you're showing up, then you can worry about optimizing. So, like, the phrase I like is standardize before you optimize.
Right.
So make it the standard in your life before you worry about making it great.
Right. And our society is so based on showing up and having these outcomes and performing. And this brings such relief to think that it's the art of showing up. Just show up for the event, trust what's going to happen after, and then in time you'll build this muscle that you'll start developing the repetitive action, and you'll get the same results, and it'll actually be sustainable. That's a great relief. Wonderful. Well, I just want to take a quick pause, and I just want to thank everyone that's made this event possible. All of our money coaches at Capital One, and all of my colleagues who are here that have made this event happen and set up this interview. And for those of you online, if you have any questions, you can submit questions at CapXTalk.FORA.tv. And in the end, we'll put aside about 10 minutes to answer.
Do the automatic actions first, the one-time choices that automate your future behavior. The second is to do a one-time action that makes a future behavior easier. So, like, buying blackout curtains for your bedroom makes it easier to get better sleep each night. You still have to close the curtains and make sure you get in bed at the right time, but it makes it easier for that to happen. If you've done all those, then you've primed the environment to either automatically work for you or make it easier for you to do the right thing. Right. And then the third is to focus on building a habit that you have to do every time and to put effort into.
Okay.
And finance is great because it allows you to do a lot of those automatic things.
Absolutely. So first, we can automate all of our bills that we can automate. Right. Go through the whole round of what are the things that just can be automated. Then tune into what are the things that are one action that I can do, and then it'll be in play every day with pretty low action needed on my part.
And there's other stuff too, like I mentioned using a social media blocker. You can use digital software to block, like Amazon, for example. If you make too many impulse purchases, then just go ahead and block it for like a large portion of time each day.
Okay.
And forcing yourself to, you could even say, like, block it Monday through Friday, and then only allow yourself to look at it on the weekends, so that whenever you get the urge to buy something, you just have to, like, write it on your to-do list. And then if you really want it, when Saturday rolls around, you can still get it. I have a friend who, whenever he wants to make a purchase, he tells himself, see if you can wait 24 hours. And it's just about like increasing the space between that stimulus and your response. And if you can do that, a lot of times you find you just kind of wanted it, you didn't really want it.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, while we're on that, when it comes to decision making, financial decision making, it sounds like automating things can help us. It sounds like there's this 24-hour rule of maybe waiting and seeing if we really want it. I love your example of on Amazon or even other sites, maybe turning it off where you somehow can't make purchases for Monday through Friday, so it gives you a window. Are there any other tips that help us avoid or stay away from making hindrance towards something, a behavior that we don't want to do?
Yeah, it's a good good question. So you could also just create like a rule for yourself. So, it's not perfect because you have to hold yourself accountable to it, but you could say, for example, each time you want to buy something on Amazon, you just add it to the cart and then it has to sit there. You can't check out at the same time. So that's just another way to increase that space a little bit.
Right.
But your question reminds me of a larger topic that I write about, which is what I would call like habits of avoidance. So there are these habits where we don't want to do something. So for example, I don't want to check social media, or no alcohol for a month, or no purchases for the week, or whatever. And it's really hard for any habit to stick if it's not rewarding in the moment. And all of these habits of avoidance are like almost by definition not rewarding.
Right,
because
absolutely.
you decide to not check Facebook, and then the next time you get a craving to check it, your brain thinks, well, like last time I did this, I didn't have any benefit for doing it, right? I wanted to do it, but then I didn't get anything out of it, so why would I resist this time? So the trick is to twist it, to invert it, so that you get some kind of benefit from doing nothing, from avoiding. Wow. So one example of this, I was telling you before we walked out, I have a friend a reader actually, who he and his wife want to go out to eat less. They want to spend less money going out to restaurants and so on. And to do this, they decided that whenever they decide to stay home and cook dinner, they're going to transfer $50 into a savings account. And so it's a way that, and then at the end of the year, they're going to use whatever money they've saved up and put it towards their vacation to Europe or whatever. And it's a way to make the action of not doing something, not going out to eat, immediately satisfying. And you can do this for any habit, right? You could, if you don't check social media, you could like put $1 in an envelope, or if you don't watch Netflix that day, then you could put $5 in a savings account or whatever, and gradually accumulate some kind of reward toward the ultimate goal that you're going for. But you're trying to find a way to get like an immediate satisfaction from something that would otherwise not be satisfying.
Definitely. I think we all need to have a reward system to change our behaviors. It sounds like if there's just a void there, it's going to be really tough. I mean,
it's actually how the brain learns, right? Like
if you positive incentive.
Pretty much everything you've learned in life has happened through trial and error. You try something, and then if it doesn't work, you decide not to do that again. Or if you don't like the result, you decide not to do it again. If it does give you the result that you want, then you decide to do it. Now, there's a wide variance in those things, which is why people have different habits. So, for example, you may feel stressed. One person feels stressed, and so they decide to smoke a cigarette, and then their brain learns, oh, this helps me reduce anxiety, so next time I should do that again. Another person feels stressed, and they go for a run, and their brain learns, oh, this helps me reduce anxiety, so I should do that again. And a third person bites their nails or whatever, right? There could be good or bad solutions for the same problem, but you need to get some kind of reward, some kind of solution for the problem you're facing in order for your brain to realize, oh, I need to repeat this in the future. And that's what we're talking about there, is you're trying to give yourself a reason or a signal that this is worth doing again.
Yeah, well, that reminds me about something I read in some of your articles around how to identify if something is a good habit for you or not. Like, how can you identify if your habits are good or not? And I'll say a little bit about it, but I'll let you add on to it. Something you shared with me was, our good habits usually are hard to do at first. They're not the things we want to do, and that's kind of a sign that it's maybe a good habit. Going to the gym takes something, maybe saving money takes something. Whereas maybe a habit that's not good for you is a lot easier to participate in or to show up for. You might not be experiencing as much resistance. So how would you shed light on that, how we can identify that?
So I think one way to think about it is pretty much every behavior has multiple outcomes across time, or produces multiple outcomes across time. So usually the case is that our bad habits produce an immediate outcome that is beneficial, enjoyable, satisfying, pleasurable. It feels good to eat a donut right now because it's tasty, but the ultimate outcome is bad. You gain weight in a month or whatever. Our good habits, like you said, are often the inverse, where it costs you something right now. To go to the gym, you sweat, and it takes effort and energy, and you're tired, and requires you to be disciplined and so on. But the ultimate outcome a month from now is that you're fit. And so I think sometimes people will say, well, there can't really be good and bad habits because it wouldn't be a habit if it didn't give you something. But that, I think, is the distinction, that bad habits typically they might give you a good immediate outcome, but they give you a bad ultimate outcome. And good habits give you a good ultimate outcome. And so when you're trying to decide, like, should I be doing this or not, think about the type of person that you want to become, the type of identity that you want to have. And you can do this at work too, right? You can think about the identity that you want your team to have, your organization to have, your culture. What is the ultimate outcome we want? And what are the habits that give us that ultimate outcome, even if the immediate outcome is a little bit different or hard or so on.
Right. And would you recommend we review our habits often to see, or does it just as they arise, take a look at them? Like, what's
That's
the
a really
best?
good question. So it might depend a little bit based on what you're focusing on and like the area of life we're talking about. You know, for example, your review period might be different at work than it is at home. But what I've decided to start doing, so each year I have 2 periods of reflection and review. At the end of the year, I do an annual review each December. And this is mostly to kind of get a gauge on, did I actually follow through on the stuff that I said I wanted to do? So I look at how many workouts I did throughout the year and how many I did each month. I look at how many places I traveled to. Travel's like a priority for me, so I want to go to new places, and so I check that. I look at how many articles I wrote, so that's kind of my creative habit. And I do this for a couple different areas of my life, you know, like just checking in and seeing whether what I said I wanted to do followed what I actually did. But then about halfway through the year, usually around 4th of July or so, I'll also conduct what I call an integrity report. And this is more about seeing if it's less about did I do the habits I said and more about do my habits match the type of person that I say I want to be. So I asked 3 questions. The first is, what are my core values? And so that's a chance to like revisit that and talk about what's important to me. The second is, where did I live up to those core values? So it's kind of a chance to like pat yourself in the back and talk about what you did well. And then the third question is, where did I fall down? Like what did I say was important to me, but actually I didn't follow through on? Where do I say this is a value, but actually I don't? And it's important for habits to check in like that, but I also think it's important for character and integrity, because it's the kind of thing, like if you ask anybody, do you have integrity? Like everybody says yes. But what ends up happening is as life goes on, you make these just this once exceptions to things, and then you turn around 5 or 10 years later and you're in a very different place than you thought a person like you would be.
Right.
And so having a period to check in every now and then kind of pulls you back to center and make sure that you're realigned with your values and principles.
Well, great. Well, that leads in perfectly to the next tip I actually wanted to ask you about, is around how, every purchase does become a trade-off. And when we say yes to spending on something, we don't always acknowledge it or notice it, but we are saying no to something else. So how can we have our spending be aligned with our values?
Well, I think first of all, there's just a really important truth wrapped up in that, which is life is a series of trade-offs. And I think we look at the words yes and the words no, the word yes and the word no, as equal. But in fact, they're very different. Saying no to something only means no to that one thing in the moment. Saying yes to something means no to everything else.
Ooh, wow.
Because you have decided this is where I'm going to spend my time and energy right now. So the fact that I said yes to this event means that all the other potential options that I could be doing for this hour are gone.
Right.
I said no to every other possibility in my life. And
so we're almost underestimating how significant our yes is.
I think we very much underestimate. And I'm guilty of that just like everybody else, but I think we definitely do. I mean, we have limited time in life, and the things that any one of us could be a billion different things just based on what you decide to say yes to. But we only live out one of those billion options. And it's determined by those things that you say yes to. And so, to your point, everything is a trade-off. And I think the first step to that is accepting that. And as soon as you accept that that's the reality, that you can only live one of these billion possibilities, you start to put more weight on your decisions and think more carefully about where you're going to be spending your time. And the second step then is, all right, well, how do I want to spend my time? And that's where that period of reflection review, things like the integrity report, your annual review, thinking through what is important to me? What does it mean to live a good life? I mean, these are very big questions, and I don't know that sometimes they're easy to dismiss because they feel a little self-helpy. They feel a little, they feel a little bit like a leadership camp or something. But the truth is you do only get that one life. And so you need to think carefully about what you want that to look like.
Wow.
And after you've done that, then we can get more into the tactics about, okay, I have decided that I only have one life to live and I want to spend it traveling, so that means I need a certain amount of money to travel. And so then you start getting into trade-offs about should I go out to dinner with my friends on Tuesday, or should I put that towards my savings fund for Australia or whatever. And I think that those decisions, those daily trade-offs, become easier once you've had the bigger conversation.
Wow. Well, the power of decision making, I mean, I know that is something else you talk about, is really something we do in our money coaching program. It's really about us realizing how much every choice we're making is shaping our lives, and not to take any of them lightly. So I'm just being reminded of that in this conversation with you, that how significant that is. So I'm wondering, on a real practical level then, when we're about to buy something and we're considering it, what questions could we ask ourselves to help us identify if we're a yes or no to that purchase, and know if it is aligned with our values? So
there's plenty of questions that I think you could ask, but I don't know how effective that strategy is going to be, because I don't think, from my own experience and from the research I've read, I just don't think people are going to remember to ask in the moment. You could say, like, for example, should I buy this latte or should I put this $5 towards my fund for a new house? But nobody really thinks that way in daily life.
Right,
when you're standing in line and you're thinking, I need to get some coffee and go to work.
Right.
Like, your brain just isn't there.
You're not in that level of deep thinking.
Same way when you're on Amazon or shopping for a book or whatever. You're thinking about, your attention can only be oriented towards, attention is like the bottleneck of the mind. And so, it can only be narrowed onto a very small amount of things at one moment. And so it's really hard to keep like your bigger life goals and like all of your financial plans in mind while you're focusing on that specific purchase.
Right.
So I think what is a more useful or more practical way to solve that problem of trade-offs is to do some of the things we mentioned earlier about locking in your future behavior. So when you're motivated, go ahead and set up that recurring block to eliminate Amazon or whatever, Nordstrom's or so on. Or when you're motivated, commit to something in the future that you know that you would want, rather than the impulse purchase. So for example, if we take habits, committing to waking up at 6 a.m. and going on a run with your friend is a way to lock in your future behavior when you're feeling that motivation earlier, right? Like maybe it's Saturday night and you're like laying in bed and you're thinking, I'm finally going to do it. I'm going to get my life together. I'm going to wake up early and go for a run, right? In the moment, it's really easy to think that because there's no cost to your immediate self. And you're thinking in the morning, I'm definitely going to be motivated. But when the morning comes, your brain is prioritizing for the immediate gratification of staying in bed rather than the ultimate thing that you want. And so you need to find a way to lock in that behavior, and getting your friend to join you is one way to do that.
So I hear you saying don't give yourself a moment to have your big questions and inquire into what you want to do, but just set up the behaviors and do it in the moment. And then also, you might review it later. You'll have a chance to look it over, so you don't have to have so much pressure on yourself in the moment.
There's a way to do it. You would just need to be very specific about it. Like, you need to tie the behavior to something you do before every purchase. Like, for example, when I pull my credit card out, I will ask myself, does this purchase align with my values? Or something like that. Or when I pull my credit card out, I will ask myself, does this help me achieve my financial goals? And you need to like practice that over and over again. Like it sounds silly, but you could literally sit in your room and like do it 50 times and just say it every single time, because you're trying to condition yourself to do that. In order to make that work, you need a trigger that follows you around each purchase, because you need a reminder to do it. If you don't have a reminder, like a reason, a cue that would like prompt that question, then I just don't think that you're going to be able to come up with it on the spot each time, or just remember.
Right. Could you put a note on your credit card, like a little Post-it?
I thought about that. I actually suggest that in one of the talks with the money coaches. Like, what if you say you were like saving for your house and you printed a picture of your dream house out and like clipped it to your credit card with like a paper clip or something. Yeah, there are like little ways to do that. I don't know. I'm not sure that would work for everybody, but there's definitely options there.
Yeah. Okay. So another tip around your goals being believable to you. So how do you advise us around, we want to pick a goal that's maybe just beyond our current, abilities, but not stretching too far. Because so often we choose these goals that are so lofty, and so we don't actually make any headway, or we aren't able to determine what those little steps are. How would you suggest determining, like, what is that next level for us?
So the analogy that I like here is like you're playing a game of tennis. So imagine that you're playing a game of tennis against, I don't know, Roger Federer or Serena Williams or somebody. Well, like, it might be cool for a minute, but if you're actually trying to win, it's going to be pretty demotivating pretty quickly because you're going to lose every point. Or the inverse is like, say you're playing tennis against like a 4-year-old. Like, again, it might be cute for a minute, but if like you're actually trying to win, it's going to be very boring because you're going to win every point. But if you play against somebody who's like your peer, who's right around your level, that's actually incredibly motivating because like you could win, but only if you really try. And so that edge where it's like 50% chance of winning, 50% chance of losing, the science research has shown that that's about the most motivating level of challenge. So scientists would call this a challenge of just manageable difficulty.
50-50.
And I like to call it like the Goldilocks rule. It's like not too hard, not too easy, just right. You know? And so what you're looking for, and this is key for sustaining motivation on any habit or goal that you're trying to work on over the long run. You're looking for a way to keep yourself challenged that's just on the edge of your ability, right? Like you will succeed quite a few times, at least 50%, let's say, but only if you give some effort. And that's like you're getting just enough positive feedback to stay motivated, just enough negative feedback to stay engaged. Because if you're always getting what you want, then you just get bored. So
what would your process be then in your life if you had a financial goal? How would you determine what is that financial goal that has that 50-50 ratio?
Well, so there's actually been some research that's been done on this, on like what the most motivating financial level is for people. And what researchers usually find, it's around like 20 to 25% more than what you have right now. So if you ask pretty much anybody how much money they want to earn, no matter what income level they're at, they can make like $50,000 a year, make $100,000, make $500,000, make $1 million. Almost everybody will say about 20 to 25% more of what they have than what they have. And so people are always kind of like, we have this internal craving, right? This desire for a little bit more. And I think that there's probably some evolutionary argument there. You know, like when we lived on the African savanna, you needed to have some level of desire for more because food and resources were hard to come by. And so the people who had some level of craving, even some like hint of greed, so to speak, associated with like food and resources, were the ones who were more likely to survive. And now we're walking around with that in a very modern world, like totally different rewards and resources that we're focused on. But we still have that like innate wiring for a little bit more than what we have. A little bit more. Okay.
Hopefully we can use that in our favor. Okay, well, the last tip before we switch gears, so most people don't want to look at their financial habits, is what we found. But to grow financially, we do kind of need to look at it. What would you say to people who are sort of avoiding just kind of taking a look and examining and being honest with themselves?
Well, avoiding is just, I mean, you can either choose to have pain now or pain later, is what I would say. So you can either choose to look at it now and ignore it for the time being, or in which case you're locking in the choice a month from now or a year from now that you're not going to have as much money as you would like, or you'll be struggling to like figure out where the next dollar is coming from and so on. Or you can go through the pain of growth now and choose to change how the system is designed or your plan or your goal so that a year from now or 5 years from now or whenever, you're looking at a better setup than you currently have. And so much of this does come down to awareness. Like you can't, the original place, the foundation of all behavior change is some level of awareness of what needs to be changed. You can't, at least not in any designed way, change your outcomes if you're not aware of it. There's a great story about, if you go to Japan, they have like one of the most effective train systems in the world. And if you walk out onto the platform or step onto the train, you'll see the conductors doing all these interesting things where they're pointing at different things. So like the conductor will point at the speed and say the speed out loud as they're pulling into the station, or they'll point at the signal on the track and say the signal is green before they leave. Or the people on the platform will like point along the platform and say the platform is clear. And it looks kind of ridiculous because you're like, well, they're just saying things that are already happening. But what they're doing is they're raising their conscious level of awareness about what's going on. And this system, which is called pointing and calling, has been found to reduce accidents significantly, like over 80%. The New York subway system implemented a version of it that was point only, and incorrectly like berthed subways went down like 54%. And so the point is, by making yourself aware of something, you make it much more likely that you can actually change it.
Absolutely.
And the same thing I think is true for our habits in any area, and certainly our financial habits. Once you point and call at it, you can actually do something
Point
about
and
it.
call. We might need that to be a new tool, definitely. I find myself saying all the time in coaching sessions that awareness is enough. Awareness is 90% of it. And we often give people an exercise to do a money ritual where they can just look over their spendings and look at it, and maybe I'll now say point and call. I spent $50 on coffees. I spent $200 on Amazon, and just ending the exercise with your awareness is enough. You don't, in that moment, need to also create behavior change or new goals or berate yourself or anything like that. It's just having this awareness is so much of the battle.
Well, I mean, human behavior is often to optimize for whatever's measured. So, like if you step on the scale every morning, you start to optimize for the number on the scale. Whether that's healthy or not, we can have a different discussion about it. But the point is, once you're aware of the number, you naturally start looking for ways to win that game.
Right.
And so, awareness just in itself is usually enough for people to say, oh, I need to change this because I see it.
Yeah.
So many of our financial decisions, they're invisible to us, right? We pull our credit card out, or a lot of the stuff we don't even pull a credit card out for anymore. You set up Netflix and it just charges you every month and you don't even think about it.
Yes.
And so the not being aware of it or having it be vague and invisible and not really concrete in any sense makes it very hard to change. You don't feel the pain of it at any moment.
Absolutely.
So awareness helps you see some of that.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so I think we're going to move to a question from the audience. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my quick question is, how do you see as identity, habits, and your beliefs intertwined?
Yeah, so how does identity and beliefs intertwined, and habits? So it's a good question. We talked earlier about that onion and kind of how they, how those different layers build on each other. I think that the answer to that is probably what we said earlier about the two-way street. That's the link. That's how they're intertwined.
Is so powerful.
Is that your behaviors provide evidence of your identity. Your identity then influences your choices and the next behavior, and then it just becomes this either virtuous or vicious cycle, this self-fulfilling loop.
And then are you then noticing, is your identity changing and evolving as well then in that dialogue?
It is always changing, which is a fascinating thing to think about, really. There's no, if a surgeon were to cut you open or a geneticist were to analyze your DNA, there is no identity gene or identity organ. It's kind of like a painting that's constantly being retouched in some sense. You are you, but it's being adjusted and updated.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key lessons too about sustaining behavior change or advancing to the next level of performance is that you need to be willing to upgrade and expand your identity. You need to be willing to kind of leave a portion, not all of it, but a portion of your old self behind, so that you can become this new person that maybe maximizes your potential or become the person you're meant to become.
Absolutely. Yep. So I have a question coming through online. How can I develop self-control?
Okay, so this is an interesting question because the research on this runs very counter to what the standard cultural conversation is. The normal conversation that we have about self-control is that you need more willpower, you need more grit, you need to persevere, and so on. And certainly, all of those qualities are great. But when scientists look at people who have high self-control, what they actually find is that they're not that much different than people who have low self-control. They just get exposed to temptations less.
Okay.
Which sounds like super simple, but just the single biggest thing you can do to increase your self-control is to reduce the number of times you're exposed to a temptation. So reduce exposure. So this is things like unsubscribe from emails, get off of social media. It depends on the habit, but if you want to cut back on the amount of calories you're eating, then don't follow a bunch of food accounts on Instagram because every time you see that, you're being cued and you have to resist. It takes a little bit of self-control to avoid that.
Right.
So you're just trying to structure your life so that you see the cues that benefit you and not the ones that pull you away.
Right. Well, and how could one put themselves, and this would be different for each person, but just generally speaking, to put yourself in the best state for your spending, would that mean things like don't go to places you don't want to spend on, how could you set up a great environment for your spending habits?
So, I mean, this depends on how extreme you want to get, right? But like, so first of all, from the highest level, certain cities have different costs of living. So if it's really important to you, move to a place where the cost of living is lower. And then all of your spending is kind of taking care of you in that way. Then the next question is, all right, I'm living in a certain place. So what are the environments that I surround myself with? And, you'll see like the cultures that you are a part of, there might not be a bigger driver or motivator of human behavior than the social cultures that you're a part of. So the tribes, the groups, we'll just call it the subcultures that you belong to. So, for example, if you are an investment banker and you belong to that subculture, then buying really expensive multi-$1,000 suits is something that like everybody there does. So you either need to choose to also buy a really expensive suit to act as a signal to everybody else like, hey, I belong, I'm also one of us, or to run counter to that culture and not buy that. Right. And that's an extreme example of something that we all face in the cultures that we're in, where there are certain purchases that are normal for that group. Yes. And so you need to ask, like, do the groups that I'm a part of match up with the financial goals that I have? Right. Because you might be able to resist the flow of the culture once or twice or every now and then, but to do it day in and day out for months or years on end is very, very hard, because it means that each time you do that, you're casting a signal to the rest of the group that I'm a little bit different than what we say this group stands for. Right. And so you're kind of like threatening the friendship or threatening your status in that community. Right. And that becomes really hard to do over the long run.
Right. Well, so much of what you talk about is around setting it up so that your habits are in line, so that you have so much energy and creativity and freedom for the things that are important to you. So I hear you saying now, the groups we're a part of and the circles we're a part of are such an influence on us. And so why waste energy being in a group that's not really aligned with you pretty well, because you're going to have to take so much energy to show up differently than they are. And if you are aligned, it's going to make it so much easier, and it's going to really support your habits, and you'll start thriving and repeating them with a lot more.
It's it's not that you don't need courage or that you don't need a willingness to like stand by your own principles, because we all need that. I mean, no culture is going to be perfectly designed with you in mind, with to support your lifestyle. Right. So you need to have that, but it becomes much easier once you're relatively aligned with the groups that you're in. So the phrase that I like is, join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. Because for pretty much anything you can think of, there's a group where that behavior is normal. Like exercise. A lot of people really struggle to, exercise is not normal for me. It feels like a lot. It feels like a real sacrifice. There are plenty of cultures out there where going to the gym every day is like, it's literally normal. It's not a sacrifice for them. And by hanging out with those kind of people, you start to internalize those kind of beliefs. And again, that's just one example that can apply to pretty much any culture, or any tribe, any subgroup, whatever you want to term it as.
Well, it sounds like there's a need out there for us to have groups and be a part of circles with people maybe around that share the same spending habits as us. Or
where this is big for spending and it is parenting. I hear from a lot of parents who, they say like, my kid is in school and all the other parents are throwing these expensive birthday parties and like having them involved in all these extracurricular activities that cost money and so on. And like eventually it just starts eating into the family's finances. And that can be really hard because it becomes, what ends up happening is parents use those decisions as a proxy for, my kid is involved in all this stuff, or my kid had this great birthday party, therefore look at how great of a parent I must be. Right, so it's really, again, it's about showing a social signal that like I belong or I'm supposed to be a great parent, and resisting that is hard because you want to be seen in the eyes of other parents and the rest of the community as someone who's valuable and high status and so on. So in situations like that, sometimes it's really valuable. Everybody knows this, like everybody's feeling it, but they're all kind of falling into the same patterns. And sometimes it's really valuable to have someone step up and say it. You don't even have to be like mean about it or anything, but to say like, to actively say like, we're going to have a relatively budget-friendly birthday party, and to like kind of take a stand for that. I could see
Oh, that would
like
be
so
great.
many moms who would love to hop on board with that on Facebook if they saw a post like that,
Right.
but nobody steps up and says it.
Okay.
And so the culture just ends up like sweeping you along.
Right.
But anyway, again,
Well, how can
just
we
a small example.
That's a great example. I wonder how we can begin supporting, those first steps, so that then it's kind of like the naming it and calling it. So then we're just in more conscious choice, and we're
Right.
not necessarily following the herd. Whether we want to spend a lot or a little, it's just about what's in alignment for us.
Yeah, awareness of the cultural habits, like common awareness, I guess, between the people in the culture. That can change a lot, because then the hidden game that's going on behind it, once it gets named, it's like less appealing.
Yes.
If it's not named, then everybody just kind of keeps doing it and acts like they're doing it for a different reason.
Right. Okay, I think we might have one more question from the audience.
Yeah.
I had a question here. Are our habits decided at all by our genes, or how much is really in our control when it comes to habits or changing habits?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So genes and biology play an important and significant role in all of our behaviors. What's interesting is, like, the more that I study this, it seems like there are two simultaneous truths, opposing truths, that are both somehow true at the same time. So the first truth is that our genes and our biology determine our behavior more than we realize. The second truth is more of our behaviors and habits and choices each day are conditioned by our environment than we realize. And it's like, it doesn't seem like those two things can be possible, but so let me just talk about genes for a minute, since that's what you asked about. Researchers have found that all kinds of things associated with our personality do have some kind of link to our genes. So for example, one of my favorite studies, they had babies in the nursing ward, and they would play a harsh noise in like the room next door, and some of the babies would turn away from the noise, and some of the babies would turn toward the noise. And when they tracked these kids when they grew up, the ones that turned toward the noise were more likely to be extroverted, and the ones that turned away from it were more likely to be introverted.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, there's some genetic wiring there. So the most reliable personality tests are called the Big Five. And so I'll see if I can remember all of them off the top of my head. So extroversion, introversion, extroversion is the first spectrum. Agreeableness, introversion, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Let's see, the acronym is OCEAN. So openness to experience. And then the third one is C. What would that be? Maybe it'll come to me. But the point here is that those 5 pieces of your personality have some genetic component tied to them. And so, people who are high in agreeableness, for example, tend to be warm and compassionate and kind. You could see how someone who has that genetic predisposition would be more likely to get in the habit of like writing thank you notes, for example. It just like feels natural to them. It doesn't feel like a
more
cost.
natural habit.
Whereas someone who's low in agreeableness, it's just not, it's more work for them.
Right.
So I think that the way that I would see genes and habits interplaying with our environment is that you're born with a certain set of genetic propensities or inclinations, and as you're exposed to experiences throughout life, the ones that are more natural for your inclinations are more likely to become a habit for you. It's not that you can't get conditioned in a different way, but it's just more likely that you'll lean that way. And the longer time goes on, the more surface area you have for those genetic inclinations to nudge you in a certain direction. And in fact, this is what a lot of genetic studies show, is that early in life, like when students, for example, are in first grade or third grade or something like that, the environment matters a lot for the difference in outcomes. But the longer that life goes on, the less of an impact environment has and the more of an impact genes have. It's not that they like one totally takes over for another, but it's just that you give yourself more and more opportunities for your natural inclinations to kind of come to the front. So yeah, it's definitely both for sure. And somehow it seems like both are even more powerful than we normally realize.
Right, awesome.
Yeah.
Great question, thank you. We're gonna take one last question before we wrap up through online. It says, how can I stay motivated when I don't see results immediately?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, something that I think is probably central to the process of like building better habits or getting better. Okay, so earlier we talked about this idea of maybe like building a loyalty system for yourself,
Right.
like with the moving money into an account whenever you don't go out to eat, for example. The key the reason why that works is because it provides an immediate benefit to the action, right? And so, read the question again. What was it?
How can we stay motivated even if we're not seeing results immediately?
So, and that's kind of the key. That's the reason why you don't feel motivated is because you're not seeing results immediately. Right. When you do see results immediately, you have a reason to continue. So the phrase that I like, I think I got this from Greg McCown, who's the author of Essentialism. The most effective form of motivation is progress. When you make progress, you naturally want to stay motivated because you're going in the right direction.
Yep.
So you need to find a way to see that you're making progress, to visualize the progress. So I'll give you 2 ways to do that. So the first is you can find a different measurement. So let's say, for example, that you want to get in shape and you're not losing weight. You step on the scale doesn't move. Now you feel very demotivated because you're not getting the immediate feedback that you wanted. So this is why, like, different types of measurement, what do they call? People call it non-scale victories. Sometimes people talk about, like, well, the number on the scale is the same, but my jeans fit that didn't fit before, or I have better energy, or my skin looks better, or whatever.
Right.
These are a different way to measure the benefit that you're getting from that action. And so now you're seeing an immediate benefit. The second one, and this would be great for financial habits, for saving goals, would be good for, really, you could use it for any habit, but is to use what's called a habit tracker. And the goal here is just so the simplest version is you get a calendar, and every day that you do your habit of, skipping a latte or not shopping or not spending money or saving $10 or whatever, you put an X on that day. After a few days, you're going to get a little bit of a chain going where it's like 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row. And at that point, your only goal becomes don't break the chain. It doesn't matter if you did it as well as you wanted or wasn't as pretty as you wanted or so on. Just don't break the chain. And I have friends who do that for their workout habits. They got chains going down every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for going to the gym. I know a guy who does that for video. So every day that he edits 30 minutes of video, he's a videographer, then he puts an X on the calendar. But the point is, as soon as you do the habit, you get the immediate benefit of marking it off. And so it doesn't have to be big, but you need some immediate way to feel successful in the moment.
Absolutely.
Because if you feel successful, if you seem like you're making progress, then you have a reason to stay motivated.
Absolutely. Great. Well, that's a great segue, actually, to closing our time together. Thank you so much, James.
Yeah,
thank you. A really rich conversation. And so much of what we were talking about in this last question is around tiny triumphs. And that's a lot about what we're saying here at Capital One is that these big goals are accomplished by tiny triumphs, these small steps. So this conversation has shed a lot of light on what are those little steps that can happen and how those can build up over time and we'll reach our goals. And even this last example of even if you're just making an X on your calendar because you showed up for something, that is something we want to celebrate as a tiny triumph. I want to thank everyone who was here in the audience, and just a couple quick things. If you'd like to watch this talk, you can find it on #CapXTalk and watch the interview in full. And our Capital One Cafe pages will be posting through the end of March tiny triumph videos and more snippets of these types of conversations. So please tune in online and join the dialogue with us. And lastly, those of you here in the cafe, please stick around. We're going to have refreshments, and we'd love to socialize and spend a little time together before you leave. And I think that's it. I just want to let you all know that wherever you are in your financial goals, here at Capital One, we want to help them become manageable steps that you can take in your daily life. And we're committed to helping you improve your relationship with money. So thank you so much for joining us tonight and being a part of the conversation. And we hope to see you again soon.